welcome to the news update on NTA International. I'm Elizabeth Stober. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has presented certificates of return to Governor Godwin Obaseki and Philip Shuaibu of the People's Democratic Party. This signifies the official recognition of the pair as the governor-elect and deputy governor-elect of Edo State, following the successful conduct of the September 19 gubernatorial election. The certificate was presented by the resident electoral commissioner for Edo, Bayelsa and Rivers, May Agbamuche Mbu. Latest figures by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control confirms 195 new cases of COVID-19 in the country as at 21st September. The cases were recorded in 10 states and the Federal Capital Territory. With the 195 new cases, the total number of confirmed cases stands at 57,437, 47,674 discharged, with 1,100 deaths. England's Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove says people should work from home to reduce social mixing and slow the spread of the coronavirus. This advice is coming as pubs, bars, restaurants and other hospitality venues in England are told they must have a 10 p.m. closing time from Thursday. A meeting has been scheduled for Tuesday between the Prime Minister Boris Johnson and First Ministers of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. After the meeting, the Prime Minister is expected to address the nation in a live broadcast and make public closing time for hospitality venues. Now, Italians have voted in a referendum to cut the size of the country's lower house by more than a third. Almost 70% of people voted in favor of the change, with almost all votes counted. The number of members of parliament in the lower house will be reduced from 634 to 400. The Senate will also be downsized. The referendum was pushed by the Five Star Movement, part of the governing coalition, which argued that the move would reduce costs. President Muhammadu Buhari felicitates with former governor of Imo State, Owele Rochas Okorocha, on his 58th birthday, joining friends and family to celebrate the consummate entrepreneur and philanthropist. In a statement signed by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, President Buhari shares the moment of joy with political associates of Owele Rochas Okorocha, Senator representing Imo West Senatorial District in the 9th Assembly. President Buhari prays that the Almighty God will grant Owele Rochas Okorocha long life and good health in the service of the country and humanity. And those are the stories trending on the hour. Thanks for watching. I'm Elizabeth Stover. Bye for now.
United Nations marks 75 years as the world battles a pandemic, economic challenges, and protracted skirmishes in locations around the world. ECOWAS Vision 2050 going through tweaks to accommodate new global realities. And on the home front, one down, one to go. Ondo indigenes gear up for governorship election as Edo determines its course for the next 4 years. This is Political Update on the NTA. I am Fisayo Ogunfuyi. Welcome. President Muhammadu Buhari says if the global community is to achieve the United Nations it needs and build a desired future for all, the Security Council must be reformed and a truly global approach adopted to tackle negative developments, which also include the global the COVID-19 pandemic. The president stated this while addressing the high-level virtual meeting to commemorate the 75th anniversary of United Nations.
Today's celebration is a remarkable milestone in the history of the United Nations.
For 7.5 decades, President Muhammadu Buhari said the United Nations has remained true to the aspirations of his founding fathers, growing in membership and scope to reflect contemporary global trends, as well as playing a crucial role in fostering peace and security. Lives have been saved and improved, rights of the vulnerable defended, while collective actions taken to invest in conflict resolution and peacekeeping, shelter refugees, and foster development.
As an active member of the organization, Nigeria has contributed human, financial, and material resources to several United Nations peacekeeping operations. We have also provided humanitarian aid to refugees and displaced persons, helped countries in tackling diseases such as Ebola, and extended both human and financial resources as technical aid to other countries. In addition, we have served on 5 occasions as non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council and contributed significantly to the promotion of international peace and security.
President Buhari is, however, worried that in spite of the progress made, the world is still faced with complex challenges, and efforts towards addressing impediments for the attainment of Agenda 2030 for sustainable development were undermined by the COVID-19 pandemic.
The inward-looking tendencies exhibited by member states in the wake of the pandemic have particularly revealed an urgent need for us to strengthen international cooperation, unity, and solidarity to address all negative developments and search for possible solutions, including an effective vaccine. We implore nations to adopt a global approach in addressing the global health emergency in a bid to build the future we want.
The Nigerian leader also emphasized the imperative of a fair and equitable representation in the Security Council towards achieving the desired United Nations.
The demand for the reform of the United Nations Security Council is just, and a place for Africa in the very strategic organ of the organization is long overdue. It is my hope that this anniversary will encourage us to respond to numerous challenges we face and support efforts aimed at building the United Nations system we desire.
While reiterating Nigeria's commitment to multilateralism and a rules-based international system, President Buhari said his country will sustain efforts at upholding the principles of human rights, peace and security, as well as democratic governance towards rebuilding the United Nations of everyone's dream.
To the sub-region now, programs and activities within the framework of ECOWAS Vision 2050 have been finalized will now be adjusted to accommodate changes brought about by COVID-19 pandemic to enable member nations cope more effectively with future shocks. The chairman of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government, President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, who visited ECOWAS Commission in Abuja, says this is now a priority.
Is the first visit to the ECOWAS Commission headquarters in Abuja since its election in September 7th in Niamey, Niger Republic, as chair of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government. President Nana Addo Akufo-Addo wants to see the level of implementation of various ECOWAS programs and projects, evaluate them along with the heads of ECOWAS institutions, to give impetus to his own agenda anchored on issues like tackling rising terrorism in the region, strengthening response to COVID-19, free trade and consolidation of democracy.
I congratulate His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the ECOWAS champion on the fight against COVID-19, for the successes recorded under his supervision. ECOWAS should take a lead role in the deliberations to produce an indigenous or African vaccine to combat the virus.
The president of ECOWAS Commission, Jean-Claude Cassibrau, was optimistic that despite the challenges posed by COVID-19, the various institutions of the Commission won't lose too much grounds in realizing their mandates.
Please be assured that the head of institution and the staff are available to work with you to address the challenges ahead. We are at your disposal to ensure the success of the measures entrusted to you by the leaders.
President Nana Addo Akufo-Addo will lead the regional body for the next 1 year, during which issues of greater economic integration and monetary union are expected to feature prominently in its engagements.
And coming home, the leadership of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, has lauded the new initiatives brought into the electoral process and what it describes as a remarkable improvement by security agencies as demonstrated during last Saturday's governorship election in Edo State.
The National Publicity Secretary of the PDP, Kola Olobondiyan, said the party applauds the use of virtual portal by INEC to upload results directly from the polling unit, which is believed to be the base of any election. The initiative, he adds, made it impossible for electoral violators to hijack the process.
This victory, as won by the people of Edo State, is historic.
On security, the PDP says it noted remarkable improvement in their activities. The PDP appreciates the candidate of the APC, Pastor Sagi Zeyamu, whose participation in the election it believes helped to deepen the nation's democracy, and urges him to team up with his brother, Governor Godwin Obaseki, in the onerous task of leadership in the general interest of all Edo people.
In the same vein, the Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room says the Independent National Electoral Commission conducted a much improved governorship election in Edo State. They urged INEC to ensure that the improvements made are deepened and sustained during the Ondo State governorship election scheduled for next month.
The administration of the Edo State governorship election to the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room marked improvement on recent governorship elections. Most importantly, the Situation Room noted that INEC's processes operated smoothly. The logistic issues of distribution of materials, deployment of staff and challenges in the voters' register were significantly reduced, in addition to security personnel, which it also believed acted professionally.
This election showed that Nigerians can learn from previous setbacks in its election processes and take a step towards achieving credible elections.
The Situation Room commended INEC's use of result viewing portal to upload polling unit results in its effort at transparency in the electoral process.
The Edo State governor's election was violence-free, to the relief of stakeholders who had feared that the violence-laden rhetoric of the election participants could pose a threat to peaceful elections.
The Situation Room recommended improved compliance with health protocols as provided by
This is the network service of the NT.
Fiscal stimulus into the global economy, noting its medium-term inflationary potential. In major advanced economies, inflation mostly remained below their 2.0% long-run objectives as the recovery of both global aggregate demand and supply remained stalled. Across the group of emerging markets and developing economies, price development remained mixed, reflecting the diverse structure of these economies. The exchange rates of EMDs continued to be under pressure as global capital flows were subdued, reflecting investors' preference for gold as a safe haven. With the unprecedented and coordinated injection of liquidity by central banks and fiscal authorities globally, the risk of another financial crisis post-COVID-19 can no longer be overlooked, as this may likely crystallize into a double-digit global recession when central banks across the globe move to normalize monetary policy. In the global financial market, conditions remain relatively tight, reflecting continued uncertainties. Thus, while markets are showing moderate signs of recovery, financial conditions are yet to ease fully as investors remain cautious of the lingering risk of a second round of lockdown. Domestic economic development. Available data from the National Bureau of Statistics show that real GDP contracted by 6.1% in the second quarter of 2020, compared with expansions of 1.87% and 2.12% in the preceding quarter of 2020 and the corresponding period of 2019, respectively. The development ended the three-year trend of low but positive real GDP growth recorded in Nigeria since the end of the 2016-2017 recession. The contraction during the second quarter of 2020 was largely driven by the poor performance of both the oil and non-oil sectors due to the lockdown to contain the spread of the pandemic during the first quarter of 2020. The oil sector contracted by 6.63% in the second quarter of 2020 from a contraction of 5.03% in the previous quarter, while the non-oil sector contracted by 6.05% during the second quarter of 2020, compared with an expansion of 1.55% during the first quarter of 2020. The MPC noted the continued weakness in economic activities as indicated by the manufacturing and non-manufacturing purchasing managers indices, which remained below the 50 index points benchmark. In August 2020, manufacturing and non-manufacturing PMIs were 48.5 and 44.3 index points, respectively, compared with 42.4 and 43.3 index points in July 2020. This was attributed to slower growth in the production, business activities, new orders, supply delivery time, employment level, new export orders, and raw materials and input prices. Similarly, the employment level index component of the manufacturing and non-manufacturing PMIs in August 2020 were 44.6 and 44.3 index points respectively, compared with 40 and 41.1 index points in July 2020. The committee was, however, optimistic that with the easing of the lockdown and gradual resumption of economic activities, the PMIs will improve in the short to medium term. Committee expressed deep concern on the continued uptick in inflation for the 12th consecutive month, as headline inflation year-on-year rose to 13.22% in August 2020 from 12.82% in July 2020. The increase in headline inflation was largely driven by the persistent increase in the food component, which rose to 16% in August 2020 from 15.48% in July 2020. The core component also rose to 10.52% in August from 10.1% in July 2020. These upticks were driven primarily by legacy structural factors such as the inadequate state of critical infrastructure and broad-based security challenges across the country, which dampened production activities. Other factors include the disruption of supply chains following restrictions to movement to curb the spread of the pandemic, adverse weather conditions, which resulted in flooding of farmlands, as well as the inflation passed through to domestic prices following the depreciation in the exchange rate. The recent increase in energy costs is also expected to further impact the domestic price levels in the short term. Committee therefore stressed the urgent need for a combination of broad-based monetary and fiscal policy measures to curb the rise in inflation and contraction in output growth. This will involve targeted investments by the fiscal authorities to resuscitate critical infrastructure to improve the ease of doing business across the country. In addition, MPC believes the fiscal authorities can build on earlier efforts and articulate a clear strategy to attract private sector investment. The bank will, however, continue to take relevant steps to ensure that the detrimental risk of inflation to the economy is contained. The committee noted the various interventions by the CBN to reflect the economy, improve aggregate supply, and drive down inflation. Recent interventions were largely in the areas of manufacturing, agriculture, electricity and gas, solar power and housing constructions, among others. It expressed optimism that these initiatives will significantly ease the adverse impact of COVID-19 pandemic and set the economy on a path of recovery. So far, total disbursements from the bank's interventions in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic amounts to 3.5 trillion, including real sector funds, about where 216.87 billion has been disbursed, COVID-19 targeted credit facility, where 73.69 billion has been disbursed, agric and a small medium enterprise ACMIS fund, where 54.6 billion has been disbursed, healthcare and pharmaceutical support fund, where 44.47 billion has been disbursed, and the creative industry financing initiative to the youths, where 2.93 billion has also been disbursed. Under the real sector funds, a total of 87 projects that include 53 manufacturing companies, 21 agric companies, 13 service projects were funded. In the healthcare sector, 41 projects, which include 16 pharmaceutical companies and 25 hospitals and healthcare services, were funded. Under the targeted credit facility, 120,074 applicants have received financial support for investment capital. As regards the agricultural and small and medium equity investment scheme intervention is concerned, we have so far extended to a total of 14,638 applicants, while 250 small and medium enterprises, businesses, predominantly the youths, have benefited from our creative industry financing initiative. In addition to these initiatives, the CBN is set to contribute over 1.8 trillion naira of the total sum of 2.3 trillion naira needed for the federal government's one-year economic sustainability plan through its various financing interventions using the channels of participating financial institutions. The MPC is thus using this medium to appeal to our important economic stakeholders to take advantage of these intervention initiatives to help support a quick rebound in growth and the Nigerian economy. The bank's policy on loan-to-deposit ratio also resulted in a significant growth in credit to various sectors from 15.57 trillion naira to 19.33 trillion naira between the end of May 2019 and the end of August 2020, an increase of 3.77 trillion naira. This growth in credit was mainly due to manufacturing, where 866 billion naira has been disbursed, consumer credit, where 527.6 billion naira has been disbursed, oil and gas, where 477 billion naira has been disbursed, agriculture, where 287 billion naira has been disbursed, and construction, 270 billion has also so far been disbursed. On monetary aggregates, broad money supply rose to 6.93% year to date in August 2020 from 5.23% in July 2020, reflecting the increase in both net foreign assets and net domestic assets. Similarly, aggregate domestic credit grew by 6.94% in August 2020 compared with 9.43% in July 2020. Money market rates remained relatively stable in the review period with some mild volatility reflecting the prevailing liquidity conditions in the banking system. The monthly weighted average interbank core rate increased to 7.38% in August 2020 from 6.25% in July 2020, while the open buyback OBB rate decreased to 8.39% in August 2020 from 10.12% in July 2020. The MPC noted the moderate improvement in the equities market during the review period as the all-share index increased by 5.78% from 24,174.75 on July 21, 2020 to 25,572.57 on September 18, 2020. On a year-to-date basis, however, the all-share indices decreased by 4.73% compared with 26,842 as at December 31, 2019. Market capitalization also increased by 5.98% from 12.61 trillion to 13.36 trillion over the same period. As a lead indicator, therefore, this improvement in market indices signposts the commencement of a broad-based economic recovery as far as we see today. The committee also noted the decrease in the non-performing loans ratio to 6.1% at the end of August 2020, compared with 9.4% in the corresponding period of 2019, due largely to recoveries, write-offs, and disposals. Committee expressed confidence in the overall stability of the banking system as reflected in the positive performance of the financial soundness indicators despite the persistence of COVID-19 pandemic. It, however, called on the bank to sustain its regulatory oversight on the industry in the light of the continuous fragility of macroeconomic indicators and the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and the growing risk of cyber attacks on business and economic activities. On the external sector, committee noted the resumption of sales to bureau de change in a bid to improve liquidity and ease demand pressure on the foreign exchange market. Consequently, exchange rate appreciated at all the windows. The Monetary Policy Committee observed the recent improvement in external reserves and urged the bank to maintain its prudent allocation of foreign exchange towards balancing supply and demand. The outlook. The broad outlook for the global recovery remains uncertain as the headwinds associated with COVID-19 pandemic persists, especially as new indications of a second spike in the rate of infections continues to dampen prospects of a near-term recovery. With several economies contracting deeper than expected, the global economy may eventually contract beyond the 4.9% earlier projected by the IMF, as the second round of spike in the infection rate has resulted in widespread localized lockdowns in some advanced and emerging market economies. In addition, the persisting volatility in global oil prices, which is likely to continue beyond the end of 2020, as indicated by the deliveries in the oil futures market, signposts the likelihood of a disorderly global recovery. Desynchronized monetary policy accommodation by major central banks in both the advanced and emerging market economies portends the likelihood of a medium-term debt crisis which may set the global economy into another downturn if not properly managed. On the domestic economy, staff forecasts suggest that the economy may continue to grapple with the effects of the pandemic throughout the rest of the year, with persistent focus on activities meant to reverse the contraction. MPC projects growth at positive levels during the fourth quarter 2020 or latest first quarter 2021, based on the anticipated positive results from the coordinated and sustained interventions by both the monetary and fiscal authorities. These interventions include the coordinated response of the monetary and fiscal authorities to curtail the spread of the pandemic, reverse the downturn in the economy, improve revenue sources in the non-oil sector, and encourage the build-up of fiscal buffers. Committee's consideration. Committee's considerations focused on major headwinds, exerting downward pressure on output growth and upward pressure on domestic prices and inflation. The key factors considered by committee as likely to exert upward pressure on domestic prices in the near term includes the prevalence